Seated. Before we commence today's business, I wish to advise you that I've been notified that Orlia Flynn will not be speaking to her adjournment debate on the matter of improving mobile phone coverage in West Belfast today. Next item on the order of paper is member statements, and I call Cathy Mason.
Gormiagat, Cancorlia, I'm delighted to stand here today to celebrate the phenomenal success of a truly outstanding young man, Coran Murray from Balnahinch, our new minor world champion in Irish dancing. At just 9 years of age, Coran has achieved what many spend a lifetime chasing. From his first competition win in Larne in May 24 to now lifting the world title, his journey has been nothing short of inspirational. His story is a testament to what passion and hard work can achieve. Coran's dedication to his dancing has been remarkable. His commitment has not only led him to victory, but has made him a role model for young dancers everywhere who dare to dream big. But no journey is ever taken alone. Behind Coran is a very proud family that have supported him every single step of the way. Anyone who has children who take part in Irish dancing know the dedication that is involved. The local communities of Drummondess and Balnahinch have given Coran so much encouragement, and this has surely helped fuel his ambition and supported him to reach the very highest level of success. A special word of appreciation must also go to the Murray School of Dance. Coran is lucky to have the most devoted teachers there that have helped him to craft his talent. But not only Coran, the Murray School of Dance have helped hundreds of young people in the local area from all walks of life to enjoy the world of Irish dancing. They have provided and they continue to provide opportunities for so many young people to travel the world and to follow their dreams. Winning a World Championship is no small feat. It demands physical strength, courage, resilience and an extraordinary level of excellence. Coran has demonstrated all of these qualities, and he has done so with humility and grace, and importantly with an infectious smile always on his face. It's clear that Coran's story is only just beginning. His achievement is not just a personal triumph, but it gives so much hope and inspiration for others. It shows us all with belief, perseverance and passion what you can do. The impossible can become a reality. Coran, we are immensely proud of you. You have made history and you have inspired an entire community. We can't wait to see what you're going to achieve next. Gormiagat.
Philip Brett.
Mr. Speaker, during the Easter recess, news emerged that the unrepentant sectarian mass murderer Sean Kelly was convicted of yet another terrorist-related offence. Following an IRA parade in December 2022, Mr. Kelly was convicted by the Belfast High Court for a breach of Section 13 of the Terrorism Act 2020. As members of this House will be aware, in 1993, Mr. Kelly was convicted of the indiscriminate sectarian Fiscal bomb in which he murdered 9 innocent people. Mr. Kelly was convicted and served just 7 years in prison for one of the greatest atrocities of the Troubles. Under the Belfast Agreement, which continues to be a stain on the moral fabric of this society, he was released, having served less than 1 year for each person that he murdered. Following his conviction, I have contacted the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, asking that he revokes the licence of Mr. Kelly granted to him under the Belfast Agreement. It is clear that despite his conviction under terrorism-related offences, he continues to be unrepentant for the murder that he carried out on the Fiscal Road, the murder of my constituents and his continued glorification of that barbaric act. As a party, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to stand with the families of the Fiscal bombing and of innocent victims across Northern Ireland and call out those who celebrate terrorism and try to rewrite the past.
David Honeyford.
Mr. Speaker, I've mentioned sport many times in here. I'm passionate about it and how it brings our community together, but there's been some outstanding moments over the past number of weeks during recess in Lagan Valley that I just want to highlight. Lisburn Rangers have recently won their league. which is a fantastic achievement, and I've really enjoyed working with them and with the committee there, and continue to work with them to realise their dream of a new pitch and community facility at the heart of Lisburn. So I want to say well done to everybody in the team and the coaching staff and the small nucleus of volunteers that drive that club forward, and we have to give a special mention to them from the club led by Nigel Farr, absolutely magnificently led, and the club is going places with him there, so a really well done to everybody there. Another club that is Achigallan GAC, and I want to give a quick shout out to their score team, who recently won the Ulster final. We're competing and representing our Ulster at the All-Ireland final in Castlebar over the weekend, and Saturday wasn't to be for the team, but it was a fantastic effort to be there and to represent the province, and deserves to be recognised and celebrated. And score is such an important part of the GAA, and it's great to see Achigallan keeping that going and keeping the tradition of that going well. And finally, listen to Garvey Hockey Club. In the past number of weeks, Garvey have won the Kirk Cup and then the All-Ireland EY League. And then over the Easter, they hosted a major European tournament in Hillsborough, which was a fantastic weekend and run so well by a small group of volunteers. I was walking around Bow Street in Lisburn over that weekend and seeing teams chilling out there from France and Spain, Ukraine, and it was brilliant to see that community and the atmosphere that they were building around Lagan Valley. It was disappointing for Garvey to lose in the final on run-ins after drawing 3 each during the game, but what a weekend of hockey that they put on, and the atmosphere around, as I said, around Lagan Valley was fantastic. Also a quick note to the ladies team there, who have qualified for the Irish Hockey Leagues for the very first time, and they will compete at the top of Irish hockey. But all three of those clubs show that sport needs proper funding, and sport gives our community so much, but can't survive on a shoestring. And give us the massive investment we're seeing in the south, how have our teams to continue to compete from here, especially in the All-Ireland basis, going forward with very little investment coming in, and this is something I want to continue to raise. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Declan Kearney.
This Thursday marks International Workers' Day. May Day is the iconic date when we celebrate the historical and more recent struggles and achievements of workers and organised labour here in Ireland and internationally. It's an occasion for us all to recommit ourselves to the achievement of strong workers' rights and industrial democracy. The creation of any productive economy and the achievement of shared prosperity in society depends upon strong trade union organisation and a political commitment to defending workers' rights. Yesterday, the Minister for the Economy, Kiva Archibald, announced her plans to bring forward the most progressive workers' rights legislation ever in the history of this state, including proposals for good jobs, fair pay, secure employment, trade union recognition and collective bargaining rights. As we look towards this May Day, in solidarity with Irish workers north and south, let us all unite across this chamber to endorse and support the Good Jobs Bill. Let's speak with one voice in support of strong workers' rights legislation. On Saturday in Belfast and other locations, I urge everyone to join the Irish Congress of Trade Unions in marking May Day, to march in solidarity with local trade unionists, and if you have not already done so, to join a union.
Mr. Speaker, this weekend marks the 40th anniversary of the brutal, devastating and evil murder of William Heenan by the Provisional IRA in my constituency of South Down. On the 3rd of May 1985, at 7:10 in the morning, William Heenan went out to feed his small number of hens before work at his home near Castlewellan. As he approached the top yard, a gunman was waiting hiding in an outside toilet. The gunman approached him from behind, forced him to his knees and shot him twice in the back of the head at point-blank range. The gunman dragged William by his feet to conceal the body at the side of a barn. The lone gunman made his escape in William's car. The shots wakened William's 12-year-old son, Sammy, who was in bed when he heard his daddy's haunting and dying screams outside of his bedroom window, and Sammy witnessed the gunman drive off. As 12-year-old Sammy approached the yard, he saw blood and followed the trail where he found his father's body. And my heart breaks at the image of that little boy seeing this, leaving him an orphan as his mum had previously died. Sammy ran to the nearest neighbours half a mile away, distressed. The South Down Command of the Provisional IRA claimed responsibility. This was horrific and pure evil, which we all know defines the IRA. Further to that, it's a disgrace that Sinn Féin glorify this and throw salt into the wounds of every innocent victim of the IRA, with the South Down MP operating a constituency office just 5 miles from William Heenan's murder scene, called the McNulty-Magorian Advice Centre, which is formally named after 2 IRA men. McNulty, killed by his own bomb as he tried to blow up Castlewellan RUC station, and Magorian, shot by security forces while on active service for the IRA. This is disgraceful from Sinn Féin, the cause of so much hurt and pain to innocent victims locally. William Heenan was born on the 17th of December 1933 and was brought up in the townland of Leganani at the foot of Slieve Crib. An only child, worked a number of manual jobs and in the DOE road service. In the late 1950s, he enlisted in the ranks of the Ulster Special Constabulary and served until they disbanded in 1970. He married Eva Perry in 1971 and they had one son, Sammy, in 1972. William was an enthusiastic member of all loyal orders, a staunch unionist, a founding member of Leganani Accordion Band, and seldom missed a parade. William's son, Sammy, grew up to be an amazing man, of firm Christian faith, a man I'm proud to call a friend. He's been a tireless advocate within the Innocent Victims Fraternity in ensuring that the truth of the past is properly conveyed to future generations. My thoughts and prayers are with Sammy and his family today, this weekend and every day as we remember William Heenan and the truth of his story.
Timothy Gosson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Before this House rose for Easter, I placed a petition in the Business Office. Indeed, a simple petition to refer the Infrastructure Minister's decision to impose Irish language signage at Grand Central Station to the Executive for a cross-community vote. I regret to say, not a single member of this Assembly added their name beside mine. Not one. This, despite the leader of the DUP promising that his party would, and I quote, put down a marker on the issue. This, despite the chair of the Infrastructure Committee describing the decision, and again, I quote, undoubtedly controversial. This, despite the Deputy First Minister saying that it was a controversial decision which had not been brought to the Executive. And to avoid anyone in front of me feeling left out, the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party reminded us over recess, and again, I quote, the tradition of some Republicans to believe every word spoken in Irish is another bullet fired in the battle for Irish freedom. Some in this House like to speak grandly about Unionist unity. Often they like to point to my party and claim that we are the obstacle to it. Yet here was the test. Indeed, here was the opportunity. All Unionists, DUP, Ulster Unionists, TUV were all agreed that the Sinn Féin minister's actions were controversial, that they were provocative, and that they amounted to poking the loyalist community of Sandy Row in the eye. Anyone with an ounce of common sense can see it. The Sandy Row community, already ignored when it came to the demolition of the Boyne Bridge, already punished by the effective sealing off of businesses around Grand Central, will now have Sinn Féin impose Irish language signs upon them. Where was the Unionist unity when it truly mattered? Unionism will rightly ask, what did you do? Yes, plenty of tough talking, plenty of grand declarations, but when it came to it, Mr. Speaker, this was the result. A largely blank page with the sole signature of the TUV MLA for North Antrim. That is shameful. A blank page which gives Sinn Féin a blank cheque to do and act as they please. I tried to do something about it. Others will have to answer why they didn't.
Brian Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this month has marked the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in Germany, which was liberated by British troops on the 15th of April 1945. Established originally as a prisoner of war camp, it became a concentration camp for Jewish people and others who did not conform to Nazi ideology. It is estimated that over 50,000 people died there due to inhumane conditions, including lack of food and water, overcrowding, and poor sanitation causing disease. This anniversary was a main theme of the March of Life, which I had the honour of attending and speaking at in Belfast City Centre on Sunday afternoon past, parading from the Jaffa Fountain in Ann Street to the grounds of City Hall, where a commemoration was held. The first March of Life was held in 2007, organised by German people as memorial and reconciliation marches at sites connected to the Holocaust. Since then, marches have been held in 25 nations and hundreds of cities in cooperation with Christians from different denominations, as well as with the Jewish communities. The events highlight that the Holocaust perpetrated by Nazis was made possible by the indifferent silence of many and the cooperation of others. The clear message at these events is that anti-Semitism is wrong, but is a growing danger, as is all forms of racism and religious hatred. It should greatly concern us all that we have witnessed an increase in anti-Semitism following the attack by Hamas on October 7th, 2023. I have heard many speeches by elected representatives regarding the ongoing situation since that date, and I despair at the lack of balance in many of those speeches. Words have consequences, and many have chosen to speak irresponsibly in a manner which has only acted to increase anti-Semitism and damage community relations here in Northern Ireland. We long to see peace restored and an end to hostilities, and I call again for the immediate release of the remaining Israeli hostages captured that day and held captive by Hamas in Gaza. No country and no people is above criticism and scrutiny of its actions, but no democracy has been singled out for more politically motivated criticism than the State of Israel. We must never forget, as a warning from history, as unconstrained intolerance, scapegoating, and the cultivation of hatred against the people can lead to genocide and led to the Holocaust, the greatest act of evil in the history of humankind. We will not be silent.
Jerry Carroll.
Mr. Speaker, as was discussed already in this House last week, the UK Supreme Court ruled that the legal definition of a woman is based on biological sex. This decision has been a lightning rod, Mr. Speaker, for people who want to kick the trans community, and we heard a lot of that, unfortunately, in this House yesterday. There is huge fear and anxiety that does exist in the trans community because of years of an onslaught against them, targeting, misrepresenting them, and bigotry towards them, but also because of this shocking decision by the UK Supreme Court. Whilst the Equality Act, as was emphasised in this House, in theory, doesn't apply to the North, it's worth emphasising that one council in this jurisdiction has already jumped the gun and wants to implement provisions of the ruling from this Supreme Court. My message, Mr. Speaker, to this council is your decision will put people at risk, and especially the trans community. Retreat and retract. And despite attempts to talk up the Supreme Court decision, saying how it may help women, it will do nothing of the sort. Discriminating against trans people, Mr. Speaker, will not end the epidemic of violence against women and girls, which is usually caused by a family member or an ex-partner, usually a male. Taking rights from the trans community will not offer affordable and free childcare to anybody. It won't offer reproductive health care or any other material benefit for women facing oppression. The war on trans rights, Mr. Speaker, is being waged by far-right and reactionary forces in Britain and Ireland who don't give a damn about women or any oppressed people on these islands. And unfortunately, the executive is following suit by cruelly banning puberty blockers for under 18s, a form of state violence. Amongst all the spoofing And when you clear the smoke, Mr. Speaker, the reality is trans people are more likely to experience violence than most of the whole population. And for decades, some people should listen to this point, for decades the women's movement have challenged the idea that biology is destiny. And now we're being dragged back to an oppressive gender binary which should be resisted. And most ordinary people, Mr. Speaker, don't want any part in this reactionary fantasy. My message to the trans and non-binary community is solidarity. My message to those kicking down is stop your obsession with other people's genitalia. It's bizarre, it's unhealthy, and it's damaging to people's lives. And fair play, Mr. Speaker, to the activists who have already came out to protest against this shocking court decision. Don't stop the fight. People before profit are with you every single step of the way.
Jonathan Buckley.
Speaker, I rise this morning to speak about an issue that is affecting many of our towns and communities right across Northern Ireland. That is the ever-increasing number of houses of multiple occupation, HMOs, and the urgent need for tougher, smarter regulations from local councils tasked with such applications. On Friday afternoon, I shared the figures of licensed HMOs in my own constituency. In my hometown of Portadown, there are currently 38 licensed HMOs, with 14 on the one street. Let's just think for a moment what that means for those who have lived there for years. We must ask, what sort of impact will it have on those people? We see the erosion of community identity, the character of the area changed forever, increased noise and disturbance, pressure on public infrastructure, falling property values, and members, that is just scratching the surface. The reality is, and it's something very few will say out loud, but we are witnessing the unravelling of local communities as family homes are turned overnight into overcrowded bed sets. We cannot continue to ignore this problem or bury our heads. On Saturday, just the day after I revealed these statistics, the headline in the Daily Telegraph, front page, Stormer to rent homes for Channel migrants. It went on to say, home office figures show that contractors are now responsible for housing 65,700 asylum seekers. Yes, a private contractor working with the Home Office is offering landlords in England a 5-year guaranteed rent paid for by the taxpayer to house asylum seekers in some of these very same HMOs. It's rather shameless, isn't it, members? A practice that we already know has been happening in Northern Ireland and continues to go unchecked. Members, we are witnessing record levels of illegal immigrants entering the United Kingdom. And this government's failure to control our borders is directly leading to the displacement of local people. And we must not stay silent. For anyone that says that this can't be sorted, and I'll close with this. Border crossings in the United States in the first 100 days of Donald Trump is down 95%. The policy is simple. Come illegally, leave immediately.
Thank you. That brings to a conclusion member statements. We now move to opposition business. And the next item of business is a motion from the opposition on increasing fiscal devolution. Clerk, please read the motion.
That this Assembly agrees that funding arrangements for public services in Northern Ireland are not fit for purpose and calls on the Executive to produce concrete options for fiscal devolution by September 2025.
Thank you. I call Matthew O'Toole to move the motion on behalf of the opposition.
So moved.
Thank you. The Business Committee has agreed to allow up to 1 hour 30 minutes for this debate. The proposer of the motion will have 10 minutes to propose and 10 minutes to wind. All other speakers will have 5 minutes. Please open the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to be opening another Opposition Day of business here in the Northern Ireland Assembly. We made a deliberate choice, Mr. Speaker, when we drafted today's motions to be pointed, to be concise and to be specific. And you will have noticed that whenever those motions came to you and your clerks advised you on the contents of those motions and suggested amendments. Because all too often since we've come back here, we've had long, saggy, waffly motions, particularly from executive parties, with unclear actions, get-out clauses, convoluted promises, vague commitments that have been offered by executive parties. They've been amended. Ministers have said they've said sometimes they're going to deliver, sometimes they've tried to wriggle out of being clear, and then on other occasions executive parties have even voted for these motions, often where their own minister is responsible, and nothing has happened. So today what we decided to do was something a little bit different. We thought we'd be concise, which isn't always a quality that's associated with me, I have to say, but we thought we'd be concise, focused, ask for clear actions, and see how parties in this Assembly voted. The first motion today is on fiscal devolution. That is to say, the principle that more fiscal powers, i.e. the power to levy taxes and greater autonomy over how money is both raised and spent, happens here in Northern Ireland, is authorised by the Northern Ireland Assembly and overseen by the Minister of Finance. We didn't name the Minister of Finance in the motion because we thought it would be obvious that the Minister of Finance would come to answer this debate. But as I turn to my left, there is no Minister of Finance. Now, why is that interesting? It's interesting, Mr. Speaker, because if you go back and read the Sinn Féin manifesto from the Assembly election in 2022, it's quite clear that Sinn Féin supports greater fiscal devolution to the north. In fact, it was Conor Murphy, the former Sinn Féin Finance Minister, though perhaps we shouldn't be setting huge store by the former Finance Minister's fiscal authority, given his stays in five-star hotels with the public purse. It was Conor Murphy who ordered the creation of the Fiscal Commission, something that I supported in this chamber several years ago. The Fiscal Commission, which reported on greater fiscal powers for Northern Ireland. That organisation reported 4 years ago, Mr. Speaker. 4 years ago. Here's the document. So the Sinn Féin manifesto in 2022 promised greater fiscal devolution. The Sinn Féin Finance Minister Conor Murphy commissioned the Fiscal Commission to report on greater fiscal powers for Northern Ireland, and they produced a very, very detailed report led by Paul Johnson, current head of the Institute for Fiscal Studies in London, And repeatedly, Sinn Féin ministers have promised greater fiscal devolution. The current Sinn Féin Finance Minister has, in this very chamber, committed himself to greater fiscal devolution, and that being a policy that he would pursue. So we thought we put down a concise, clear motion asking the executive to commit to bringing forward plans for greater fiscal devolution. We thought, naively, that the Finance Minister, Sinn Féin Finance Minister, who believes in taking more power away from London, from the UK government, which, as we all agree, doesn't always have the best interests of this place at heart. We assumed, naively perhaps, that the Sinn Féin Finance Minister would come here to make his case, to answer our motion and to explain his view on fiscal devolution. He isn't here. He isn't in the chamber. So I think we can draw our own conclusions from that, Mr. Speaker. But to come to the substance of today's motion, since we returned to the Assembly and an executive was created in February last year, there have been consistent statements from various executive parties, particularly the party of the Finance Minister, relating to the constraints on public finance in Northern Ireland. And that's true. We are in a constrained fiscal position in Northern Ireland. There is absolutely no doubt about that. It is, however, worth saying that last year, the last financial year, that was the 24-25 financial year that we've just come out of, did see the greatest ever spending package that a Northern Ireland executive had ever seen. Now, I don't think that's going to be the case going forward, and I would add my voice to those who say that the new government has not set a path that is enough of a decisive break from the Tory party in terms of austerity politics and constrained public spending. Nevertheless, it's clear that there is or at least there should be, given all the statements made by executive parties, broad consensus on the need to devolve more fiscal power, to take more responsibility here for how we raise money and how we spend it. I think that's obvious. The Fiscal Commission report that came out in 2022, its interim report came out in 2021. They published a report setting out a range of options. They went through every form of taxation that is levied in the UK and gave their explanation for how it could, and whether it should, in their view, be devolved to Northern Ireland. They set out details for the devolution of income tax, partial devolution of income tax, as happens in Scotland, the devolution of the apprenticeship levy, which, as we all know and we've said repeatedly in this chamber, isn't best optimised for use in Northern Ireland and hasn't been properly deployed in terms of increasing apprenticeships. I'm sure the Chair of the Economy Committee and also a member of the Finance Committee might have something to say about that at some stage. The devolution of corporation tax, which, by the way, has happened. It has happened in law, but that law has never been commenced. Stamp duty land tax, which is obviously a tax on property transactions. Air passenger duty, which is already devolved, though obviously I've talked at some length about how I don't think the management of that tax has been particularly effective. And landfill tax, which is a tax on waste, obviously. So, what's happened? Well, nothing has happened so far as I could see in terms of the Fiscal Commission's findings. Last year, whenever we had an executive restoration package, there were various new processes and structures set in place. There was a transformation strand, which we have heard something about. There's been 129 million awarded for what we are told are transformation work. But there's also been this thing called the Budget Sustainability Plan. We were told that the Budget Sustainability Plan was going to mark a step change, that we were going to have to raise all this revenue locally, and it was going to be tough and it was going to be penal. Well, if you go through the Budget Sustainability Plan, Mr. Speaker, you will find not necessarily ambitious areas of new revenue raising in order to pay for public services, which we all agree are in a shocking state in this place. What you will find are some remarkably modest and small areas of revenue raising, including hospital car parking charges. The Executive and the Finance Minister scored against their target for revenue raising, not introducing a bill brought in by the Finance Minister's party which would make it free to park in hospital car parks. Now, whatever the merits or otherwise of that particular bill, let's pause a second and reflect on the absurdity of that position. Sinn Féin finance ministers have repeatedly talked, and I agree with them passionately, about the need to devolve more fiscal power here to the north so that ministers here can decide how money is raised and spent. What substance have we seen from Sinn Féin finance ministers? Well, one of the main areas is in simply not proceeding with a bill, now an act introduced by a Sinn Féin MLA. That is, I'm afraid, an absurd proposition. We have been consistent as a constructive opposition in I will give way.
I thank the member for giving way. I wonder if the member could give his view on one of the other areas for revenue raising that has been identified, and that is the increasing of public transport fares.
The increasing of public transport fares was scored, Mr. Speaker, as a tough decision that had to be made in order to increase revenue. Well, this is a decision that's made often by TransLink every year, and I also think that it's not the best decision to be making whenever you're trying to encourage people onto public transport and trying to have that step change in terms of active travel, but also decarbonisation. But let me say this, Mr. Speaker, as I draw my remarks to a conclusion. We have heard consistently since we've been back about the constraints placed on our spending power and the limitations on how we fund ourselves here in Northern Ireland. I, in various roles in the Finance Committee and here, have talked consistently about this. I haven't gone through loads of technical detail in Fiscal Council and Fiscal Commission reports because it's all there, it's all published, like so many reports that are published here. But nothing has happened about it. Nothing has happened about it. If we want to know why we breed cynicism about politics in this place, it's when people constantly make promises and not only are they not delivered upon, but there's no sign of them being delivered upon. People are treated like mugs. I think we need to devolve more fiscal power here. I think we need to raise more money, not because I think we need to put more pressure on ordinary people in Northern Ireland, and I want to be clear about that. I don't think we should be levying extra taxes simply to punish people, but I do think more of the power to raise those taxes should be here locally as they are in Scotland. I think that would give us more autonomy and more power over how we do public services. And I look forward, despite the fact that we have no representative from the Executive here to respond to us, I look forward to executive parties explaining to us why they don't want to take that added responsibility for improving people's lives here. Thank you very much.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. The DUP does not support devolved additional fiscal powers to Northern Ireland at this time. We do not believe that the capacity exists within executive departments or the Northern Ireland Civil Service to manage further complex and fundamental elements of the tax system, such as income tax or VAT. We fully support what's said in the first sentence of today's motion. Current funding arrangements for public services locally are not fit for purpose, and that is absolutely the case. And the fact that the new needs-based factor has not been baselined or backdated as if it had applied from the start of the last spending review period in 2022 has left the Executive without the guts of £500 million annually. And that situation will continue in perpetuity without agreement from the Treasury to rectify it as part of a new, fair, responsible and long-term fiscal framework. And this is action that could be taken relatively quickly with real benefits for our public services in comparison with the aims of fiscal devolution, which would require protracted negotiations or simply to get a fair hearing from the Treasury. And I wonder why is the opposition overlooking this? We look forward to seeing the results of the report commissioned from Professor Holdham on this going forward. The financial reality here is this. We have just received a challenging budget for 25-26. We are waiting on the announcements from the June monitoring rounds and from the comprehensive spending review. The Executive have made it clear, following this, there's a strong desire to move to delivering multi-year budgets here on the back of it for incoming years. We're governed by a Labour government who have proven completely unpredictable and targeted pensioners, family farms, small businesses in their first months in office, and we've no idea what else could hit us. The opposition need to get real in terms of recognising the financial and economic environment in which we are living now, and in the next few months focus on this rather than pushing for fiscal devolution options by September 2025. Of course, we should be ambitious in how we approach the funding of public services going forward. However, these efforts have to be credible. They have to be responsible. We have to be realistic about what is achievable in a context where the fiscal deficit between Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom has been widening, and the budget process is already incredibly fraught with contention between political parties. And the devolution of tax-varying powers would inevitably add a new dimension of volatility to the Executive's budget. And as unionists, we are clear of the fact that any change or upheaval of this nature could be exploited by those whose overriding intentions are not focused on transforming public services, but on settling the political and economic foundations of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland's place within it. And ironically, in a separate motion being debated today, the opposition calls for an infrastructure commission to be established, given weaknesses and concerns on how major capital projects have progressed in Northern Ireland. Do they really expect the situation with fiscal devolution to be any different? Are the right skills and structures really in place to countenance taking concrete steps on this front? With the latest figures on the Northern Ireland Civil Service major capital project overspend sitting at £3 billion, we need to get our house in order. This is not the time for adding to our problems. The DUP are committed to delivering a fair funding model for Northern Ireland. Our party leader, Gavin Robinson MP, has long led on this issue in Westminster, and we are pleased to see progress, but we were clear. Whilst others celebrated, we were clear that the financial package last year fell well short of what was required to put our finances on a stable footing. And we agree that the funding arrangements for public services in Northern Ireland are not fit for purpose, but we do not support devolved additional fiscal powers to Northern Ireland at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and as other members have referenced, this motion comes at a time when our finances are in a precarious position. After 14 years of Tory austerity has now turned into Labour austerity, and that is carrying grave consequences for the Executive, for households and for businesses in Northern Ireland. I am a supporter of increased fiscal devolution for a number of reasons. First of all, I think it's more democratic to bring decisions about tax and spend closer to the people that we represent and that we elect, so that they can have more say over those policies through the democratic process. It also offers more incentive to this Executive and this Assembly to prioritise things like productivity and growing our economy, because there will then be rewards for them through the taxation system. But importantly, from my perspective, perhaps the most important argument for fiscal devolution
is that it gives the Executive and the Assembly an opportunity to levy taxation in a way that is more progressive, that is more fair, that supports economic growth and that aligns with our own social and economic priorities. And particularly at a time when all parties in this chamber are so critical of the response of the UK Government, I think we should all want more control over those levers. However, I am not glib about the complexity or the dangers, some of which Diane Forsyth set out, and so it's important that we approach this in a balanced and measured way. The first challenge is that the most important factor affecting our public finances is our needs-based formula, which affects the block grant. And I think there is a risk that if we conflate fiscal devolution with a fair funding formula for Northern Ireland, that we could find ourselves landed with trade-offs which don't serve our public finances well, and I think if you look to the experience of Wales, that is evident. So I think it's important we decouple those two arguments. Secondly, and this has been skirted around, but the Executive doesn't have a good track record, frankly, for dealing with the revenue-raising powers that it currently has. And I do fear a situation where we do not have stability in these institutions, that these institutions would be absent in the face of an economic downturn or crash, and we couldn't respond adeptly and quickly enough to those challenges for the people that we represent, or indeed that we simply could not find agreement within the Executive and that vetoes would be deployed on key issues. So fundamental reform of our public finances cannot meaningfully be decoupled from reform of our governance structures, our political institutions, to ensure they are sustainable and stable as well. So I do think the very least the Minister could do, and I am disappointed that the Minister isn't here, is irrespective of our views in this debate, to respond to it, is come to the Chamber and set out his priorities for fiscal devolution, given his party's apparent commitment to it. I think that whilst we are in an ongoing engagement with the UK Government on our fiscal framework, I agree, our immediate priority needs to be our needs-based formula, but there may come a time where we move beyond that debate and start looking at wider fiscal devolution powers. And I think the very least the Minister could do is set out his priorities in that space. So on that basis, Mr Speaker, we will be content to support the principle of the motion today, notwithstanding some of the practical considerations and concerns that we would have in terms of the risks that would come with fiscal devolution, which needs to be seriously thought through. Thank you.
I welcome this opportunity to speak in support of increasing fiscal devolution, which would give us greater opportunities to make spending decisions which prioritise interests of workers, families and communities in the North. Around 90% of the funding currently available for our public services comes from the block grant. Negative decisions taken by successive British Chancellors, be they Labour or Tory, which has reduced the money available for our health service, the education sector and infrastructure projects, has severely impacted the Executive's ability to deliver. In recent months, the British Government has once again taken decisions which heap more pressure on those who are already struggling to make ends meet, such as the sick and disabled, who will be impacted by further welfare cuts. In her spring statement, the British Chancellor reinforced her government's priorities, choosing to spend money on militarisation, on weapons of war, rather than investing in public services, protecting those in need and improving the daily lives of workers, families and communities. Given the limited fiscal powers available to the Executive and the dependence on the block grant for our public services, which is based on the spending decisions of representatives who are not elected by the people here, I recognise it is extremely challenging for the Executive to mitigate for the detrimental impact these decisions have on our people. The mitigation measures introduced to support the sick and disabled following the welfare cuts that were imposed on us a decade ago is expected to cost £47.3 million this year alone. And the 2022 Fiscal Commission's report on more fiscal devolution stated that other actions taken to protect people here from austerity policies imposed by Westminster cost the Executive £600 to £700 million per year. Greater control of revenue raising would therefore provide the Executive with more flexibility to shape policies which are suited to our local needs. Taxation systems should be based on fairness, reducing inequality and improving the efficiency, quality and capacity of public services. I also recognise the efforts being made by the current Finance Minister and his predecessor to ensure we are funded at the correct level of need. Indeed, the interim fiscal framework secured by previous Finance Minister Keith Archibald ensured an additional £248 million for our public services for this year. Ultimately, ending partition and achieving independence for all of our island, with control of our own political and economic affairs, is the best way to build the type of first-class public services that workers, families and communities here deserve. An ESRI report from earlier this month on the economies of both jurisdictions highlighted the growing deficit that the North has with the South in all commonly used measures of living standards. One of the most concerning examples of the detrimental impact austerity policies from London have had on us is that if you live in the North, you are 7 times more likely to be on a health waiting list for more than 18 months compared to those who live in the South. Partition has prevented the development of all-island public services and detrimentally impacted the delivery of those services. The success of the All-Island Children's Heart Hospital in Dublin and the North West Cancer Centre at Atlagalvin are the 2 compelling examples in the healthcare alone of the potential in delivering better public services on an all-island basis. In conclusion, we want to see greater fiscal devolution to this island. Ultimately, the full devolution of fiscal powers through Irish unity provides the greatest opportunity to build and deliver better public services that meet the needs of everyone.
All through.
And I rise to speak on this motion from the opposition, and they're definitely right, it is concise, but there's absolutely no detail in this. It talks about funding arrangements for public services in Northern Ireland. They're not fit for purpose. I don't think any of us here will disagree with that. In fact, our party, the DUP, have been campaigning for the relative need formula for a long, long time. We were the first party to voice our concerns around relative need, and we have been the consistent party all along who has pushed for that. Even when it came to the restoration of this Assembly, we pushed and we warned that we hadn't got the right financial package. And if we had had that baseline back to the spending review of 2022, that would have injected £500 million a year extra into our coffers to spend on our people. So £500 million a year. So if we do have fiscal powers, more fiscal powers, is that the range that the opposition wants to raise? £500 million a year more? And there's a danger with that. So if we get more fiscal powers, can the British government not say, our government, can they not say, well, you've got fiscal powers now, so stop complaining about the package we give you and raise your own revenue? There's a danger in that. There is an absolute danger in that. So I think the focus for this executive and this Assembly should be to make sure that we get funded properly and appropriately with regards to relative need. We're not there yet. So I think our focus should be on making sure that the funding package for this devolved region is sufficient to cater for the needs of our people. We talk about fiscal powers as if it's something that you'll use. Progressively was one of the words used. Fairly was another word used. Really? We have a devolution of corporation tax. Why have we not used it? The reason why we haven't used it is because the pressure is to put it down. So, the opposition brings forward this motion. I'm very interested to hear also Sinn Féin, who holds the ministry too. What fiscal powers do you actually want? Do you want to raise income tax? Do you want to raise VAT? Both those rises in those fiscal levers would cause massive damage to our economy, our people, and our growth. So what is it? What is it from the opposition? Why haven't they put it down? Do they want to raise £500 million on income tax? Or £500 million on VAT? And again, we don't even have a finance minister here to tell us what his plan would be. That's shameful. I agree with the opposition. The fact that we don't have a finance minister here to address this debate is contemptible. It's not only contemptible to the opposition, it's contemptible to this House. It's absolutely contemptible. So we need detail. Our party is very clear. We do not support any more fiscal powers for the very facts that my colleague Diane Forsyth has outlined. I don't think we have the capacity. I don't think we have the capability. And that's not only in the political class, that's in the civil service class. And why do I say that? And people might say that's unfair. Look had our track record. Sinn Féin lament the fact that the Republic of Ireland can do this and that so much better than Northern Ireland. Yet Sinn Féin have been in government since the duration of the Assembly. So how much blame do they put on themselves?
Would the member
with
give
regards?
way?
Yes, I will give way, yeah.
Would the member also agree that Sinn Féin are happy to be partitionist when it suits their own agenda, happy to see corporation tax lowered in the Republic of Ireland, but again drag their feet here in Northern Ireland?
Yeah,
Members, next minute.
The very valid point that the member makes. Why is it the case, when Sinn Féin have the role of Finance Minister, have they not moved on corporation tax? Even though it could synchronise our corporation tax with down south. Why not? It will take a cut in our block grant. And is that the issue? Or is it just that they're champagne socialists? Is it just that they're enjoying the money that they get from the United Kingdom? We have been given more money by our government this year than ever before, and yet it's a very challenging budget, I will agree. I think Sinn Féin enjoys that amount of money. It's a cry. It's a cry. It's a mantra to say they want more fiscal powers. Of course it is. That's all you hear from them. That's all you hear from the opposition too. But what would they do with those fiscal powers? Nobody has told us. Nobody can tell us, because they haven't got a clue. They haven't got a foggiest. And so we won't support the devolution of fiscal powers until we get a proper settlement and until we're assured that we have the capability and the capacity to deal with extra fiscal powers, and that the parties opposite won't hurt our people, won't drain our people of all their resource and all their hard-earned cash. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. I stand in for our finance spokesperson, Steve Aiken, who is happily going through a bit of post-op surgery recovery at this moment in time. I'm sure he'll be slightly more colourful on this subject than I'm likely to be. Mr. Speaker, both the Fiscal Commission and the Fiscal Council have made suggestions about closing the funding black hole between Northern Ireland and the rest of our nation. We welcome the changes in the required level of need funding and the fiscal settlement to close the gap on funding here created by the suspension of Stormont. It is clear that we are still looking again at a significant shortfall in the years to come. Historically, and again, we analyse the shortfalls over the last decades, that we can see we have consistently missed out pressures by about 0.5 billion per annum. While it is easy to blame this wholly on the austerity measures from Whitehall, and they have been significant, it also has to be recognised that on average, Northern Ireland citizens pay approximately £400 less in all forms of revenue raising than the rest of the United Kingdom. The figure for comparison in the Republic of Ireland are substantially more, with a comparative shortfall of nearly €1,000. The details of this is laid out in the excellent work the Fiscal Commission laid out. We can't keep going back to London demanding more money when we haven't put our own house in order, and we certainly have not, and that is due in many cases. That is due in many cases because we haven't had continuity of government. We also have to ask. Yes, you go on.
For giving way, and he quotes figures in relation to people in Northern Ireland paying proportionally less in terms of revenue raised. But would the member also concede that there is an issue around taxable capacity? I mean, disposable incomes are comparably less in Northern Ireland, property prices are comparably less in Northern Ireland, and so in some senses it is an unfair comparison to other jurisdictions.
Certainly a swayed comparison, and the member is absolutely right, but we still have to look at it and look at measures that we can implement, we're not, and I'll touch on them in a moment. So we have to ask, are our public services efficient? How is it that we are incapable of public procurement? How is it that we have spent multi-millions on the A5 with not 1 square metre of tarmac laid? That building construction has basically come to a halt because of inadequate water infrastructure, that our economy department has disclaimed accounts. Equally, and because this is an opposition motion, what are the costs of the rigorous implementers being accrued? Just think of how much of the close on £1 billion spent on our IT systems, consultancy fees, creation of border posts could have been better allocated to health transformation or even paying for the much needed police recruitment. To be honest, I do not think that anyone here really believes we have a public service that is fit for purpose. Chasing overspend on 1.3 million with forensic accountants while ignoring and deflecting the 3.5 billion overspend on capital projects is more than indicative of the lack of any critical thinking. A fundamental independent review on how we spend our existing money, coupled with the transformation of those who deliver it, the civil service, is now a prerequisite. Anyone who believes we have a fit-for-purpose delivery mechanism is kidding themselves and kidding the people of Northern Ireland. So what is the Finance Minister proposing? We know he's not proposing mutualisation of Northern Ireland water, instead creating a developer's tax on new homes and properties, which will ultimately see the extra costs passed on to the buyers. No review of student funding, even though universities are hemorrhaging staff and students. No innovative funding model for the York Street Exchange. No creation of an infrastructure bond, selling the long-term prosperity of Northern Ireland with overseas wealth funds. No substantial revision of the rating system. Or if he is, he's not keeping us informed. The Minister, of course, would bite back if he was here, but he's not here, and I will join the chorus of others to say I think that is absolutely disgraceful that he's not here. I'll not if you don't mind. The Minister will, of course, bite back, referring to the non-existent budget proposals from the opposition. But he is the Finance Minister, and as the Finance Minister, it's up to him to tell us how he is going to close the annual 0.5 billion gap. Because that is what is glaring in the absence of any proposal that he is bringing forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
David Hollyford. Mr. Speaker, I speak this. Owen has laid out our the finance position. I speak this from economy, but I want to start by the DEP telling us about capability and capacity, and that was repeated, and I appreciate that. But to say we're punishing people, or the risk of punishing people from the people that brought us and lobbied for the UK economy to drop with Brexit, is a bit rich. To say drain our people of the hard-earned cash from the people that brought us RHI and the waste there is a little rich to have in this chamber. So I want to start with that, but we start with the fact our current fund arrangements are stifling our growth. This Assembly is less accountable to our people because of that, and it causes a complete lack of ambition within this place and within this region. But what we're currently working for is not fit for purpose as we look for the long term, as we look at the funding of our public services. As Paul already said about being squeezed, but our economic growth remains really low. It is better than the rest of the UK, but it is still next to close to zero. But the UK government, years of austerity has brought all of the public spend into focus. And I suppose it doesn't give an excuse for a minister not to bring the changes or reforms through, and we desperately need those reforms to come through health, to come through other departments that bring the changes and reforms that we've been talking about for years. It also doesn't give an excuse not to deal with the urgent need of the cost of division and the cost that we're wasting every year out of our budgets, having two of everything rather than just getting on and uniting our community and working as one. And also the security of this Assembly and the disregard that the two large parties, have had for this chamber over the years, where this place has been down as often as it's been up, and hasn't worked. And simply the threat remains that at any point either DUP or Sinn Féin can pull this place down is also a barrier to growth. It doesn't build confidence, it does not, and if anything, we need those rules changed. And we hear responses from both that they've no plans to collapse or whatever, but we need actions, not words. And we need to start. A start would be to relinquish that veto, that maybe we'd be able to plan for the longer term, that we'd actually look to assist them to change this region to actually prosper and deliver for everybody. When it comes to the physical devolution of more powers, we agree with the principle of this, but it's been mentioned, and I want to pick up on what Paul said there about corporation tax, and I'm only using this as an example because Paul used it. He said we get on with this. So if we were to drop the rate of corporation tax, we take the budget out of our public services that you've already said are squeezed, and in that you've just defined the issue. So if we drop corporation tax, public services are squeezed. So which public service do we take that budget from? There's the problem. But the benefit that would come or potentially come from growing our economy through that, none of that benefit stays here. So we don't see the benefit of raising tax, but we cost us on our public services. And that's where it's just not fit for purpose, where we need to be able to retain finance here, that we can be accountable to our people, that this is how we spend our money. And the one has already gone through about the progressive, and I make no apology for saying we want to see progressive taxation, that the poorest and the lowest incomes are looked after, and those with higher and the super rich pay more in our country. Yeah.
Remember, when he talks about the poor and the super rich, where is his defining lines? What does he class and define as super rich? What does he define as poor?
Or tax the rich.
Multi-millionaire.
Members, next minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that's already been defined. We're talking about, we're talking about the mega rich here, the billionaires and the thing. We're talking about people in the very lowest that are the most vulnerable. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, was there a food bank in your area? 20 years ago, was there? No, there wasn't. And there wasn't, and we're seeing the right across the board, and that is a shame on our society. The people are leaving. No, I'm not giving away again because I've got limited time. But we look at the south and our closest neighbour, and if you look at that, and they have major issues of their own, and that's grand. But the massive advantage that the south have over ourselves is the ability to raise tax and actually have a budget to be able to pay to fix those issues, and we don't have that, and as a result our economy suffers, and because of that we can't help and we can't bring those incentives, or we haven't brought those incentives to small business. Look at hospitality with the national insurance rises with rates, and if you look at the costs are so high here, but nobody's making a fortune of money in that industry, and what we've got is demand will drop. We become uncompetitive and we slow our economy, where we aren't able to, our local hospitality aren't able to compete with lower VAT rates and with lower rates in other areas. So we get our money, and herein lies the problem, we get our pot of money to spend, but we don't have the ambition to actually generate and the mechanisms to generate and be able to create more and create better for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Philip Brett.
Speaker, and can I welcome the Leader of the Opposition back to his place after the birth of his daughter, and can I congratulate him on that. Mr. Speaker, I have a confession to make. When opposition days come along the night before, I usually struggle to sleep in worry and in anticipation of what is coming before me. Particularly, Mr. Speaker, when the chair of the Finance Committee, the subject is on fiscal devolution. I expected, Mr. Speaker, a 10-page order paper to be on my desk this morning, setting out a concrete plan how those who want to destroy the United Kingdom would outline their great plans for an economic revolution here in Northern Ireland. Well, Mr. Speaker, when I picked up the order paper, I needn't worry. The Leader of the Opposition and his party managed the grand total of one sentence on the order paper today of what we were going to discuss. In fact, it has brought so much attention and so much interest to nationalist parties that we have a grand total of 6 members on the benches opposite, I think shows their interest in the issue before us today. We have listened to this debate, Mr. Speaker, but we've received absolutely no detail. In the speeches so far by the Leader of the Opposition, we got no detail on the proposals in which he wants to enact, which taxes he wants to see devolve, but more importantly, Mr. Speaker, what he would do with those taxes. Does he want to increase the level of income tax? Does he want to raise the level of national insurance contribution on our businesses, just like his sister party is doing in our sovereign parliament? No details, Mr. Speaker, but yet we go to platitudes. We will make a more progressive taxing system. What on earth does that mean? Mr. Honeyford tried to articulate that. He moved from taxing millionaires to taxing billionaires. How many billionaires are there in Northern Ireland, Mr. Speaker? Because they have no idea of what they want to introduce. I'll happily give way.
I thank the member for giving way. And would you say also it's interesting that Mr. Honeyford has perhaps clarified what actual tax the rich means, because he's went to ultra rich. His party didn't define that when they initially talked about it. Does that mean further taxation on higher tax bracket, 40%?
And the 10-minute contributions made by the Alliance Party here today, they aren't able to set out, Mr. Speaker, what their proposals are or what they mean, because they're more for 30-second TikTok and for Twitter clips than they are for economic for economic realities. I often, Mr. Speaker, in the Finance Committee hear the Leader of the Opposition set out how terrible it was for long-haul APD to be devolved to this Assembly, and the decision that was taken by the Executive, which included his party, to abolish that. Then, with the same breath today, it is, oh, let's devolve even more powers. Mr. Speaker, the consistency of this opposition is very clear and is very true. They want the Executive to carry out not only their job of delivering good public services for Northern Ireland, but setting out their plans for the opposition as well, because clearly they can't articulate them to the Assembly today. We will not be supporting the motion that is before us today to hand more fiscal powers to government departments and government ministers who are frankly inept. Yesterday, the Leader of the Opposition rightly raised the issue of the pedestrianisation of Hill Street. Sinn Féin have held that infrastructure ministry for 4 years, and we can't even pedestrianise a street in Belfast, yet the Leader of the Opposition thinks that we should vote to hand powers to vary income tax to those very people, the very department that have spent £30 million on the York Street interchange in my constituency without a single spade being put on the ground. And when we talk about progressive taxation, we need to hear what those members opposite who support this motion actually mean, because meaningless platitudes, Mr. Speaker, do not cut the mustard. So we will be opposing the motion before us today.
Timothy Gaston.
Mr. Speaker, it didn't take long for the first speaker in this debate to turn the blame to Westminster. We've heard about Tory austerity, we've heard about Labour austerity, but the speakers always stop there. They don't go on and say, but when Stormont, the Executive, sets their budget, that's now a made in Stormont austerity, owned by Sinn Féin, the DUP, the Alliance and the Ulster Unionists. And yes, they might sit outside the camp and somewhat the yearning of the SDLP, who crave for the day when they return to that Executive table. I appreciate that the SDLP, who brought the motion, are a nationalist party. I also appreciate that Sinn Féin and the Alliance, who are the cheerleaders for this motion, are also nationalist parties. And in that regard, I understand this motion. It fits their long-standing desire to dilute the bonds which bind the United Kingdom together. But there's a fundamental contradiction here. If the SDLP were serious about being the opposition, we hear about them, the constructive opposition, but always keep the gloves on, they would recognise that Stormont is fundamentally dysfunctional. Devolving more sensitive fiscal powers to an Assembly which is up and down more times than a yo-yo is not in Northern Ireland's interests. So, let's be clear what is at stake. The idea of devolving corporation tax was frequently discussed years ago, and it has been mentioned here today. In 2014, the Treasury made it plain cutting corporation tax would slash our block grant by 400 to 750 million. That would devastate our public services, which are already under significant pressure. More recently, we debated the Ulster Unionist motion calling for an Irish Sea VAT border, in this House. I was amazed to be the only unionist to voice any opposition in that debate. But beyond that, under the protocol, control over VAT and goods has already shifted to Brussels. Goods moving between Northern Ireland and Great Britain are now treated as exports and imports, complete with extra documentation because we are subject to EU VAT rules, not British ones. Far from wanting control of those powers, the SDLP were happy to give them away to Brussels. Supporters of the motion need to answer this. If Stormont takes control of more fiscal powers, who will pay for the inevitable shortfall in the funding of our health system, on our roads, and in our schools? It wouldn't be a Gaston speech without a Professor Hotham quote. The Hotham Commission, considering corporation tax for Wales, rejected it because it would introduce substantial unwelcome volatility into their budget. My goodness, Stormont would do well to reflect on that advice before dragging Northern Ireland further into greater instability. I do fully support Northern Ireland getting funded to the level of need, but when it comes to fiscal powers, my goodness, it's a no from me now, and it's a no forever. We heard the member talk about food banks and they didn't exist 20 years ago. When Stormont has been here, this wonderful place that will sort all the issues, what has Stormont done about it? What has Stormont delivered to need people not to go to food banks? You're going to say, oh, but if we had greater fiscal powers, we could do this, that and the other fantasy stuff. Stormont has been here, Stormont hasn't delivered. This, absolutely, whoever wants to come in first.
Thank the member given way and share, I suppose, the lamentation of many members around the need for food banks in our communities. However, would the member accept that the mitigation package worked on by all parties in this Assembly at the time has sheltered many households from the worst excesses of welfare reform?
Members, next minute.
Member for his contribution, but in doing so, you're taking money from one department to put to another. Yes, there's some good mitigations there, but you've got to also look at where has the money come from to fund that. So, when we all talk about how great Stormont is and we need to protect it, and we need more powers in this place because it'll solve everything, this place has been up and running and it hasn't delivered. So this mess needs to be owned by the executive parties who all sit round that table. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, Carl.
Earlier this month, the Assembly passed a motion supporting tax increases on the super wealthy, which I supported and spoke on. It's obviously to be welcomed that some parties are finally in step with ordinary people who have long been demanding that the rich pay their way for our public services. But the Executive always seems to direct its focus solely at Westminster and never towards the wealthy and powerful at our front door, and they do exist. Since 2015, Mr. Speaker, the North has had the power to set corporation tax rates, but the conversation is dominated by calls mainly from the business lobby and their enablers who want to lower corporation tax and not on the social good that can come about for proper taxation and for the rich to pay their way. Mr. Speaker, People Before Profit has always been clear that the corporation tax should be raised in the North. It shouldn't be a controversial statement to say this, but corporations should pay at least the same amount of tax that people pay on their wages. I'll give way to anybody who wants to disagree on that point. Okay. So 6 companies in the North, Mr. Speaker, have a turnover of £1 billion. The top 100 companies in the North have a turnover of £35 billion. We're not talking about taxing corner shops here. There is an abundance of corporate wealth here, and this includes wealth also accumulated by private companies delivering what are supposed to be public services. I will give a sure.
Does the member recognise the difference between turnover and profit, and the businesses pay tax on profit, not on turnover?
Members, next minute.
I do, yes, and I also recognise assets, and companies and corporations have combined wealth, assets, profit, and they're all bound in together, and it depends what column you're looking at, but money is money, and there's billions there. So great economics from the party doesn't want to tax corporations from the sidelines. Over the past decade, Mr. Speaker, this executive has handed £125 million to just one private hospital to tackle our health waiting lists. The DUP support that handout as well. It seems like there's an endless pit of money to line the pockets of the rich, but never enough money for a decent social security system, fair pay, social housing, mental health services, and our collapsing education system. It's the same old story, whether it's the Tories, Labour, or this executive. This island, Mr. Speaker, is a hostile environment for working class communities, but it's a safe haven for multi-million corporations like Apple and Google and many others. The North, disgracefully so, Mr. Speaker, is the only part of these islands that gives multinational corporation rates relief. So parties in this building lament, I'll give away in a second, lament rates raises for ordinary people and households, but the parties are happy for corporations to be given millions of pounds a handout every single year while their profit margins, their assets, their numbers, call it what you want, rise. I'll give way.
Could the member point to at least one successful economy in the world that adopts his socialist communist outlook on economics?
Yeah, I mean, I would happy to be engaged with that argument despite, well, let me speak. But the member has a bit of a disgraceful track record, Mr. Speaker, of sticking the boot in the asylum seekers while he's talking about the housing crisis. So I'm loath to kind of give way to his pretty disgraceful agenda, and the member should not kick down. And the member happy to kick migrants, happy to kick asylum seekers, but not a word to say about billionaires, about corporations who are ripping people off. So less of that. So, Mr. Speaker, I continue. £73 million of public money each year is being spent on the likes of Moy Park, Caterpillar and Coca-Cola. No opposition for Mr. Buckley, who claims to stand up for the common people, whatever he views on that. So the question is, Mr. Speaker, what sort of society do we want? One that welcomes big businesses with open arms, bends over backwards for them, giving them endless rates, tax breaks, while they exploit workers and local environment, and one that frankly plays in the hand of the Trump economic agenda, or one that forces huge corporations, the millionaires and the billionaires, to pay their fair share, and they do exist on this island. A radical redistribution of wealth, Mr. Speaker, is the only way to materially improve the lives of the majority of people here. It's time we use our fiscal powers to break with the regressive economic orthodoxy of Westminster and the Dáil. Our public services and the ordinary people who use them depend upon it.
Call Matthew O'Toole to wind on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I just check? I have 10 minutes to wind. Is that correct? Thank you very much. I welcome the fact that members have participated in a colourful debate, and I'll reflect on some of what was said. It's important to say, first of all, many people commented on the brevity, a quality not often associated with me, or it has to be said, Mr. Frew, who participated in this debate. Mr. Frew noted that there wasn't much detail, or there was a short motion. As I said, he and I aren't often noted for concision, but that was a deliberate choice on the part of the opposition. There have been lots of motions with lots of words, lots of sub-clauses, amended until the cows come home, and nothing has happened. So we wanted as the opposition to put down a clear, declarative motion on an important principle, which is around fiscal devolution. And it comes back to a lot of what we've talked about as an opposition, which is the connection between holding power and taking responsibility. An important thing was said by Mr. Honeyford, who's in a different party, but I often acknowledge when people in different parties say things I agree with. And Mr. Honeyford and his colleague Mr. Tennyson and others acknowledge that there is a breakdown in this place between people who hold power and taking responsibility, and the connected issue of accountability. And it's been demonstrated vividly today, Mr. Speaker, by the failure of the Finance Minister to even do us the courtesy of showing up to this chamber and addressing this issue, despite, as I said and others said, his party's repeated commitment to fiscal devolution and their repeated statements reflecting on the shortcomings in our current funding model, which is acknowledged in our motion. He didn't turn up today This is part of a deeper problem we have in this society and our politics, more than our society, in our politics here, which is about the connection between holding power and taking responsibility, and then being accountable to the public for how you use that power. This is right at the heart of devolution. It's right at the heart of power, whether you're a unionist or a nationalist. That's why we believe in fiscal devolution, not just because we believe in more power here and then ultimately Irish unity. And let me say, the cause and the argument for fiscal devolution does not have to be one that is unionist or nationalist. I agree with Gemma Dolan that we need ultimately to move towards constitutional change, taking more decisions on this island and ultimately constitutional change. But you don't need to be a nationalist at all to believe that. You don't need to. You can be opposed to Irish unity and still believe that inside the UK we would be better governed if more decisions were taken locally. So I hear the TUV in the corner perhaps signalling their discontent. But I want to come back to some of what was said by unionist members. Lots of unionist members, particularly Mr Gaston, the TUV, talked about how terrible Stormont was, how bad Stormont was at delivery, and a considerable part of my day job is pointing out Stormont ministers not delivering for people. But Mr Gaston said that, I believe, and I think virtually every unionist member who stood up and spoke said a version of, look at how poor ministers perform here, how can we trust them and indeed the civil service with more responsibility. Those same people, many of them, also said today, and have certainly said on other occasions, isn't the Labour government awful? Isn't what they're doing awful, whether it relates to inheritance tax, rises in national insurance, or a whole range of other fiscal decisions over which we have limited power? Those parties are also want to talk about the limitations in our funding model. They don't see a contradiction there, it seems. They are willing to point out the contradiction between those of us who aspire to constitutional change, but not, Mr Speaker, acknowledge the contradiction in their own position, which is that there's a UK government that does awful things to us, and it's really frustrating that they're imposing national insurance, that they're increasing inheritance tax for farmers, that they're doing all these things, but we shouldn't ever talk about taking more power here for ourselves. There is a contradiction there, and I'm sure some unionist members in their heart of hearts would acknowledge that contradiction. It doesn't mean if you'd... I'm happy to give way.
And it goes to the heart of governance, a lot of what he's saying, and I have sympathy for that argument. But does he realise that our government's government is temporary, whereas in this place, parties tend to be in government permanent? And that is a massive difference.
Well, the idea of being permanently in government is quite a novel one for the SDLP at the minute, but I acknowledge that there are flaws in our political system, in particularly the incentivisation to his party and the other big party to collapse this place repeatedly. And that does come back to the core point we're making. Power means responsibility and accountability. That means when you seek power, you take responsibility for staying in power, making decisions, making people's lives better and being accountable. So yes, as others said, including Owen Tennyson, there is an inextricable link, to use a phrase from the 90s, between taking fiscal powers and taking more responsibility. But whether you're a unionist, nationalist or don't ascribe to any constitutional position, if we end up in this constant doom loop that, well, we can't take more powers because effectively we're useless here and our politics is dysfunctional and we don't trust one another and we don't even trust the civil service to deliver. But by the way, we don't trust the UK government either, whether it's Labour or Tory. They're either delivering austerity or we can't trust them on various things. Then we're in this constant doom loop where we can't offer our people anything. So I say, particularly to unionist members, just think through the logic of a lot of what you said here today. I will give way briefly to Mr Buckley.
Giving way on. Would he not accept that the main issue in terms of this Labour government for many members on these benches and others is the deceitful way in which Labour claimed to come to power? They didn't tell us that they were going to tax business in the way that they have, tax the farmer, rob the pensioner. They lied. They were deceitful. That's the issue.
The government, I disagree with the policies he's outlined, but I'm talking about the structural issue to do with our system. He's put his points on the record. I just want to come on to some of the detail of fiscal power and what it means here, because one of the points made to me was that we didn't list, presumably in exhaustive detail with costings. I would have been interested to see if the Speaker would have accepted that motion if we had put down a 10-page motion listing every... No, I'm indicating from the Chair that he would not have. If we had put down a 10-page motion indicating every single fiscal change we'd like to make, let me give some examples. First of all, I'll start with some of the fiscal things that we've already said that we would like to look at. And we haven't seen progress on it from the Executive looking at their current fiscal powers. Number one, we have dereliction in Mr Brett's constituency the Cathedral Quarter, the shameful falling into dereliction of what is called the Tribeca Quarter, where we have vacant property which is being allowed to fall into dereliction, some of which is given a permanent rates break through our vacant property relief. That's something that exists in our rate system at the minute. We would curtail that, and we've been open about that. At the minute in Northern Ireland, unlike across the water or down south, if your property is vacant, you get basically a permanent tax break. We've said we'd like to reform that. There are other things I would like to look at in terms of new fiscal powers. One of them would be a vacant land tax to incentivise development. I think that's something we could look at. The purpose of our motion, though, is not to say every form of fiscal devolution is always good in every context. It's to say, let's produce concrete options. Let's look at what those concrete options are. We've already had a fiscal commission which has reported. Their report was extraordinarily detailed. In fact, they produced multiple reports. They said they didn't think that VAT was an appropriate tax for devolution, but they did think that income tax, partially devolving income tax, might be appropriate. They talked about others. I have talked about APD in the past. One of the reasons I've talked about APD, and clearly all parties in this, the unionist parties in this Assembly aren't inherently opposed to devolution because they supported the devolution of APD, is the blunt use that was made of it. What I'd like to hear from the Finance Minister, and this is why I wish the Finance Minister were here, is an elaboration on his plans and his party's support for fiscal devolution, because I support it too. But I am depressed to see two members from his party here, no minister, to simply answer the basic principle, which is if you support this thing, and if you say that our current arrangements are not fit for purpose, I will give way in a second to Mr Carroll, have the basic courtesy to come to this chamber and explain what your position is and what you're doing about it in the context of the fiscal framework negotiations that are apparently going on at the minute. The fact that he hasn't done that is, I think, frankly ridiculous and shameful. I'll give way briefly.
Thank the member for giving way and agreeing on his point with the Minister. Could the member clarify his party's position on the evolution of corporation tax? I presume they're in favour of devolving it to increase the rate of corporation tax, or what is the position?
It's important to say devolution tax has already been devolved, but the power has not been commenced. I think at the minute it would be difficult to advocate lowering corporation tax because of the impact it would have in terms of the block grant adjustment. But I have limited time, so I'm going to have to close my remarks. I've answered his question. I think, Mr Speaker, we need to fundamentally revisit the idea of power, responsibility and accountability in this chamber. I think fiscal powers can be a critical part of it. Our motion is a completely reasonable, concise one. We've asked for the Finance Minister to bring forward proposals. He and his party have said over years and years that they want to do that. I agree with that. I am frankly shocked that he isn't in the chamber to give us an account of that. I think we need to tell the people, whether they are unionist, nationalist or don't give two hoots about the Constitution, that the people they elect here can take meaningful power to improve their lives, that they can take responsibility for improving their lives, rather than simply coming to this chamber and huffing and puffing about things that are done elsewhere and then saying, well, we can't do anything to change it, or we'll promise it but we'll not follow through. That's what this motion's about, and we commend it to the House.
Thank you, Mr O'Toole. At least your motion was concise. The question is that the motion stand in the order paper be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, if any, no. No. Clear the lobbies. The question will be put in 3 minutes. Order, order. Members will resume their seats. Resume your seats. The question is that the motion stand in the order paper be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, if any, no. Do we have tellers? Order, order. Tellers have been appointed as follows. Tellers for the ayes is Colin McGrath and Cara Hunter. Teller for the noes are Paul Frew and Diane Forsyth. Clear the lobbies. The assembly to divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left. Scooters. Order, order. Members resume their seats, please. Clerk, read the result.
77 members voted, 45 members voted aye, 32 members voted no. The motion is carried.
Motion is carried. The motion is carried. Unfasten the door. Point of order.
I just wondered, Mr. Speaker, if you could advise when a motion is carried and it puts a specific burden on executive with a minister with specific responsibility, even if they're not named in that motion, and that minister has voted for that motion, would it be in order for us as members to expect that minister to follow up on the outcome of that motion? I don't know if you could.
Are not tying, so it is for the minister to deal with the motion as the minister sees fit. Members take their ease whilst we change the table and move to the next motion.
Okay, members, the next item of business is a motion from the opposition on the establishment of an infrastructure commission. Clerk, please read the motion.
That this Assembly is alarmed at the continued failings in the delivery of major capital projects, as highlighted in recent reports by the Northern Ireland Audit Office and the Public Accounts Committee, and calls on the Executive to establish an infrastructure commission by the end of this mandate.
Thank you. And I call Mark Durkin to move the motion on behalf of the opposition.
Moved.
Thank you. The Business Committee has agreed to allow up to 1 hour for this debate. The proposer of the motion will have 5 minutes to propose and 5 minutes to wind. As an amendment has been selected and is published on the Marshall list, the Business Committee has agreed that 8 minutes will be added to the total time for the debate. Please open the debate on the motion.
For too long, our delivery of capital projects has been broken, plagued by delay, duplication and dysfunction, arguably a microcosm of the executive itself. But what we're left with is a legacy of delays and overruns, compounded by the malaise of those in power with responsibility. It's unforgivable and unjustifiable at this time of deep financial uncertainty, when many of our schools are crumbling like our roads, with thousands of families without a roof over their heads. We're told the coffers are dry. Meanwhile, £3 billion overspend has been squandered across major capital projects within a 5-year period. Of course, we recognise the impact of a recent increase in costs. Anyone who's had any work done anywhere knows that. But this isn't just a recent phenomenon. We've seen a decade of lack of delivery, of broken promises. Look at Casement Park, the Children's Hospital, an all-island rail network, the remediation of Maboy, and the silence from leadership is deafening. Report after report from the PAC, from the Audit Office, have been clear. We have a systemic failure here in how major projects are procured, funded and delivered, although it would appear that that clarity has been lost on leadership parties. Recommendations to crack down on duplication, tackle excessive bureaucracy, improve oversight mechanisms and the overall efficiency of capital project management have gone ignored. An infrastructure commission isn't just a nice little extra, it's a necessity. Other jurisdictions have seen the merit in such a provision and have seen the benefits of it as well. So why hasn't our executive? And don't just take my word for it. The most recent Audit Office follow-up report revealed that only one of the executive's 7 flagship projects announced a decade ago has been fully completed. Other statistics in the report are astonishing, but this is about so much more than number crunching. It represents a systemic failure to change the status quo. The absence of any oversight of projects is leading to fragmented accountability and allows those in power to pass the buck. And we feel that's exactly what today's amendment attempts to do. The establishment of an infrastructure commission is the vehicle for delivering on promises. Promises of access to housing and healthcare, decent buildings in which our children can be educated, and greater alignment with climate goals. It was SDLP Minister Nicola Mallon who first moved this conversation from aspiration to action in 2020 with the Ministerial Advisory Panel, beginning the steps towards a commission that could anchor infrastructure delivery in evidence, expertise and long-term vision, rather than one that worked to election cycles. The Executive agreed to move this forward. Members may recall some fanfare around it, and of course with the collapse in 2022. But it's frustrating that since we got back here, despite my numerous questions in the Assembly, or written questions, and I'm not the only one, the response from the Executive Office has remained largely the same for the past 15 months. The report on the SIB review is being considered, and a way forward will be a matter for the Executive in due course. The irony of delays in deciding to even set up an oversight body meant to address delays won't be lost on anyone. Decade-long delays and eye-watering overspend have become accepted as the norm. We heard huge furore around £150,000 spent on signage for Grand Central Station, Irish language signage, a debate that dragged on for weeks, but there wasn't as much as a whisper or whimper about the fact that the project itself ran £45 million over the projected £295 million cost. The truth is, the two big parties are complicit in these failures, preferring tit for tat than the tete-a-tete required to move projects and this place forward. This Commission isn't the magic bullet, but it's a start, one that will provide independent expert advice, long-term planning, and ensure that every penny spent will deliver for people. It must be established alongside planning reform in order to create a more efficient, coordinated approach to building the infrastructure that supports sustainable growth, regional balance and future prosperity. We need leadership that plans not just for the next election, but for the next generation. Propose a motion.
Thank you. I call Cathal Boylan to move the amendment.
Moved.
Thank you. You will have 5 minutes to propose the amendments and 3 minutes to wind. All other speakers in the debate will have 3 minutes. Please open the debate on the amendment.
I welcome the opportunity to speak on the motion, but I just want to say at the outset, I mean, it's disappointing that as part of the presentation to the motion that an opposition party who's fully funded wouldn't have considered bringing forward some kind of proposals or cost options in relation to... Yeah.
The proposal is in the motion that we proposed. We proposed that the Executive bring forward an Infrastructure Commission. This had been brought to the Executive 4 or 5 years ago and has been failed. The parties have failed to move it forward. There's the proposal. There's the alternative.
Thank you for the intervention, but if the member had let me finish what I was going to say without jumping on me, I said you as a party, as a fully funded opposition, has not brought any proposals to the table. You keep coming and complaining. Numerous ministers have said to us over the last period. So, no, I haven't heard any explanations. And I'll go back over it. But moving forward, last Concordia. I think we all can agree that the delivery of major capital projects is an area of concern for many of us across this chamber, and more importantly, for the people that we represent. This clearly has been highlighted by the Audit Office and the PSC, of which I am a member. A commitment to improving our infrastructure is contained within the Executive's programme for government. Delivering major projects will be vital to delivering on other commitments contained within the PFG also. Investing in water and wastewater, roads and transport and other major projects will encourage business to invest, enable house building, as well as improving connectivity across this island. However, while Sinn Féin is broadly supportive of this motion, I feel it is important that we too reflect on the reasons why many major capital projects have been faced with delay. The amendment that we propose recognises that delays to major capital projects are multifaceted. We know that major road infrastructure projects, such as the F5, are key for improving road safety and driving the economy. However, this project has been marred in legal challenges, causing delay after delay, while the majority of people in society wish to see delivery which will benefit us all. In addition to this, inflationary pressures, coupled with the impact of successive British governments' austerity agendas here in the north, and the continued approach of single-year budgets, have stifled the speed as to which progress can be made on the delivery of major capital projects. It is therefore important we continue to explore the benefits of an infrastructure commission alongside prioritising the delivery of signature projects in the here and now. I ask the members to support our amendment.
Thank you. I call Deborah Erskine.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Infrastructure investment is vitally important, and it is appropriate that we ensure money is spent wisely with projects delivered in time. Whilst I recognise that the delivery of major capital projects have failed to be delivered on time and within budget, we must be live to some of the challenges that have existed resulting in this outcome. Mainly infrastructure projects do face legal challenge, and indeed in the intervening periods of time, inflation has increased costs. Not only that, but in some cases planning matters can also have an impact. Indeed, at present, Northern Ireland already has the Strategic Investment Board, which should be holding such projects to account. And we have to be honest and ask ourselves the question, what will an Infrastructure Commission achieve? Will it be another talking shop or quango? And more importantly, how much will it cost? The SLP did not provide a cost in terms of how much this will cost an already cash-strapped executive. It's important that we do understand the cost of this. I have a lot to get through. You didn't mention it in your speech. I have a lot to get through. Without the teeth to actually deal with the issues, I do wonder, will the Infrastructure Commission be able to deal with the issues that I have raised before? Can it truly stop people from taking legal challenges which cause delay in our infrastructure projects? Will an Infrastructure Commission be able to do that, or stave the inflation that has crippled projects in recent years? Those are exactly the things that we need to be looking at if we are going to create an Infrastructure Commission. We need to truly get to the nubs of the challenges. The recent Northern Ireland Audit Office report on funding Northern Ireland Water made general remarks about planning in general. It did not reference an Infrastructure Commission, but did recommend that relevant stakeholders work purposely towards establishing appropriate arrangements to effectively coordinate and manage such investment. That's where our focus remains. We are not beholden to the idea of a commission. We recognise that improvements could be accelerated through other means, including taking forward changes stemming from the review of the Strategic Investment Board and the outworking of the investment strategy for Northern Ireland. Progress will also be realised by ensuring the right skills and expertise exist within our departments, and that there are robust measures in place to increase accountability and oversight of public money across the Northern Ireland Civil Service. There should be an onus on all executive ministers to put their shoulder to the wheel in that regard. Therefore, we will not be supporting the substantive motion today.
Thank you. And before I call the next speaker, members are reminded, and some members in particular are reminded, that when a member is clearly not given way, they shouldn't persist and try to disturb the member speaking. Call Peter McReynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I rise today as an Alliance Party infrastructure spokesperson, delighted that we have a day of infrastructure in front of us. Members will already know that I've highlighted several times now in this chamber and committee that infrastructure is a department that doesn't get the respect that it deserves. When we get it wrong or miss opportunities to improve it, our environment, our ability to get around and to create necessary homes and jobs are affected. Major capital projects are what Northern Ireland is built upon, but the problem is that they are now increasingly complex, as we've heard from the proposer of the amendment, and we can't just think it and build it anymore. Not only are delays and cost hikes the norm rather than the exception, but there are also a range of other factors that delay the completion of these projects on time and on budget. However, what's key for me in this debate is that in 2021, this Assembly and Executive agreed with the conclusions of the Ministerial Advisory Panel that our infrastructure was not delivering for our people due to the delivery and governance structures being too fragmented and lacking a strategic long-term view. For that reason, an Infrastructure Commission would empower us to deliver cleaner, greener, sustainable and inclusive growth for all. It's there in black and white on page 27 of the Consolidated COVID Recovery Plan, with the creation of a strategic and public engagement approach to long-term infrastructure planning, because this is what infrastructure projects deserve and require. However, 4 years on, we're in the exact same place, and true to form, nothing has changed. We in Alliance believe the creation of an independent, expert-led, and these are key words in establishing an infrastructure commission, is essential to guide our approach towards major infrastructure projects. Engineering experts at the table during the planning and formulation of projects, delivering what is needed outside of political interference while helping us meet our climate targets. What we have at the moment is an internal working group that isn't accountable and doesn't publish reports. Groundhog Day. Mr Deputy Speaker, I welcome this motion today, thank the opposition for having tabled it, but can we please just get on with what we've agreed in the past and start making this place function on evidence and expert input? Thank you.
I'm going to call John Stewart.
And apologies for not being in the list. I don't know what happened there. I rise on behalf of the Ulster Unionist Party today to join many organisations, including the Construction Employers Federation, Northern Ireland Business Alliance, the Institute of Civil Engineers and many others in supporting the establishment of an independent infrastructure commission for Northern Ireland. And I do thank the opposition for bringing this forward today. We believe it's a vital step if we are serious about improving how we deliver public sector capital projects and about restoring public trust in how taxpayers' money is spent. I want to commend, as others have done, the work of both the Public Accounts Committee and the Audit Office up to this point, who have compiled numerous reports on the back of evidence sought. Reports from both those organisations, the PAC and the Audit Office, have consistently highlighted serious concerns, delays, spiralling costs, poor long-term planning and a lack of rigorous project management, where major capital projects are late, over budget and fail to deliver the full benefits they promised, and we simply cannot continue to make these mistakes. In its 2023 report, the Public Accounts Committee was blunt and concluded that Northern Ireland lacks this necessary oversight and strategic direction to ensure that public infrastructure is delivered efficiently and effectively. And the Audit Office added that without major reform, and public services will continue to be undermined by poor capital delivery. The Comptroller and Auditor General, Mr Deputy Speaker, went further than that in 2024 and said it remains deeply concerning that more than 4 years after her office had last reported on the issue, there is little evidence of improvement or past lessons learned being applied to new projects. Even among the flagship projects identified as Northern Ireland's Executive's highest priority, progress has been very limited. It is clear that departments are not achieving value for money in delivering these major capital projects. Successful completion of capital projects is crucial for Northern Ireland in supporting our economy and ensuring the effective delivery of public services. And a comprehensive transformation project must be established to overhaul the system for commissioning major capital projects and ensuring stronger accountability for how these projects are delivered. That is a damning reflection from the Audit Office, and we owe it to our people to do better, Mr Deputy Speaker. Infrastructure Commission would give us the tools to just do that by operating independently, could provide expert long-term advice on Northern Ireland's infrastructure needs. It would assess major project proposals, track delivery and intervene early when problems arise, helping to ensure that projects are built on time, on budget and to the highest standard. We've already heard from the proposer and from other speakers, Mr Deputy Speaker, of the litany of capital projects that we have seen to date that have invariably gone over budget, over time and not delivered as required, whether it's the money spent so far on the A5 transport corridor that still has not seen any work progress, the millions spent on the York Street interchange, which has been a capital project priority for years, and we are still nowhere near seeing that project delivered. The list goes on. In fact, we could all point to dozens of examples throughout our constituencies of schools or hospitals or capital projects that invariably go over time and over budget.
Okay, time's up. I call Andy McMurray.
Speaker, and thank you to the opposition for bringing the motion. I welcome the motion. I agree with both parts of the motion independently of each other, although I'm not convinced that one will fully address the other. Alliance has long called for an independent, expert-led infrastructure commission to improve long-term strategic planning. We would want this commission to have a 30-year vision to prioritise, report on and drive delivery of infrastructure projects. It should assume the responsibilities of the existing Strategic Investment Board to assist departments in delivering projects. But unlike the Strategic Investment Board, it must be independent. Independence is the norm for similar bodies across the globe and is widely supported by experts. We should not be lagging behind on this. It supports stability and can bring much needed long-term perspective to strategic infrastructure planning that is free from the pressures of electoral cycles. This is key to addressing some of the major challenges and long-term needs we are facing as a society. I also agree with the first half of the motion, and I am indeed alarmed at the continued failings of the delivery of major capital projects, which have been highlighted so clearly in the recent reports by the Northern Ireland Audit Office and Public Accounts Committee. The majority of our major capital projects experience unacceptably long delays and huge overspends. Despite earlier reports highlighting the same failings, these issues have not improved. The NIAO estimated that the cost to complete the 77 projects that were in the pipeline by the end of August 23 would be 2.45 billion higher than planned. That's a 44% increase in spending that could have been invested elsewhere to improve our public services. Importantly, however, I do not think that Infrastructure Commission is a solution to all these issues, not because I don't believe in the merits of such a commission, I do, but because it would not address the root causes and delays of some of the overspends. The Strategic Investment Board looked at these root causes and they found that they do with excessively complex planning, policy and regulations, insufficient attention to stakeholder engagement, lack of expertise within departments and the unpredictability that results from complex systems. The NIO came to a similar conclusion in its report on the capacity and capability in the Northern Ireland Civil Service. These are system and delivery level issues. They are not about strategy and only marginally about advice. An Infrastructure Commission, as proposed by the Independent Ministerial Advisory Panel in 2020, would not be involved in the delivery of infrastructure project level planning and stakeholder engagement. It can advise but doesn't run these projects. This is precisely where many of the problems causing delays and overspend originate. To conclude, yes, we need an independent, expert-led infrastructure commission for the sake of evidence-based advice and improved long-term strategic planning. Equally urgently, we must address the substantial failings of infrastructure delivery in Northern Ireland. To achieve this, we must continue to reform our dysfunctional planning system and address skills and culture within departments where projects are delivered.
Thank you. Members who have spoken, I now call the Deputy First Minister to respond. And Deputy First Minister, you have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I would like to thank the members for their contributions on this important topic and the proposers of the motion for giving us the opportunity to highlight what we are already doing to improve how we plan and deliver infrastructure, but also, importantly, to reflect on what more needs to be done. Let me begin by acknowledging the issues identified by the Public Accounts Committee and the updated NIAO reports, which highlight a significant overspend on major capital projects. I have no doubt that there is a high level of commonality across all of the political parties over the years, where we are deeply frustrated by the lack of delivery or the slow delivery or the overcosts in terms of the delivery of infrastructure projects. Over many years I've had the privilege to work with many ministers from different parties, and I have no doubt that no minister goes into their role with an expectation or a desire not to deliver against the capital projects within their portfolio. And I think importantly to that point referenced in the proposer's speech around accountability, ministers are accountable for the capital projects within their portfolio. There's no doubt about that. Very often some of those projects can be cross-cutting. That presents a different set of unique challenges to be overcome. But there is also no doubt whatsoever that the way we are doing it at the moment isn't working. It isn't working for ministers, it isn't working for the executive, it isn't working for this place, but most importantly, it is not working for the people who require those services. Should it be the much desired York Street interchange, all of those people who are sitting in traffic, wasting their precious minutes and hours of their life every single week, who could really benefit from that scheme. That is not just people who are sitting in traffic, and of course it would be amiss of me not to recommend getting public transport as well, of course, as a sustainable option, but it's not just people wasting their time or sitting in that traffic. It's what they could be doing with that time in terms of productivity, in terms of the contribution to the economy, in terms of actually making their lives happier and more content with friends and family instead of sitting. The delay on capital projects has a real life impact. And of course it's not just roads, it's hospitals, it's schools, it's so many other things that have been set out by ministerial teams in the executive year after year that unfortunately, because of delays and of overruns, that executive has not been able to stand at the end of that mandate and say, we have delivered this. I know that this is an executive that wants to be able to address and to fix those issues, no matter how difficult and challenging that may be. I will give way.
Are given way, and you make the very valid point about the time it's taken many people, for specifically in the York Street interchange, sitting there in traffic. We also highlight the economic impact, and a recent fiscal study established that it's costing £1 billion a year to our local economy by not developing the York Street interchange. So how do we factor in the cost of not doing something versus the cost of doing it as well, and the impact that's having?
Remember, it's the cost of the lost opportunity It is the cost of the wasted hours. It is the cost of the additional bureaucracy or staffing or whatever else may be required to try to operate within infrastructure that is not fit for purpose. When we look at, for example, infrastructure in NI water, it is the challenge in terms of the stopping of house building or the economic development that we require to grow our economy. Of course, right at the heart of everything we want to do, right there in the programme for government, is at growing our economy objective, and we can only do that if we fix and we improve how we do infrastructure. Infrastructure is at the heart of that. In that programme for government is a desire to genuinely improve the lives of people, and that must mean addressing those public services, vital public services of education, of health, in terms of the delivery for people. And again, at the heart of that is, of course, the infrastructure that is required to deliver that. So we do acknowledge the concerns that have been raised. We share those concerns. We also share a commitment to try to tackle the issues that we face. But like some others have referenced in this place today, the initial motion suggests one potential solution. But of course, we need to look much wider than that, because we do not believe that simply just creating another commission will be the panacea to this challenge. Whatever we do must be something that actually addresses the issues and challenges that we face. And while we talk about oversight, while we talk about establishing new bodies, while we talk about independence, but importantly in all of this, of course, is democratic accountability. It is joined up working, not necessarily the creation of a new body. So while at this juncture we are not ruling out that as a possibility, nor are we saying that's the only option that's on the table, we are absolutely open to look at a range of options that may be available to us, as long as they work. We want something to work, and that's a genuine commitment that I give on behalf of the First Minister and myself, because we are, and I've said many times, we are absolutely focused on delivery. We know that this hasn't been able to be achieved in the way that other ministers have wanted it over the years, but we have a determination to fix and to change what needs to be done in order to deliver in this term and beyond. I will indeed.
Thank the Deputy First Minister for giving way. That's really what I was pointing to in relation to my contributions. It's important that we have the right skills in place. It's important that we get to the nub of the issues. For example, legal challenges. Whenever those take place, it's important that community engagement and those pieces are done correctly, so that there isn't that misinformation within communities that leads to some of that, leads to the delay in relation to our infrastructure projects.
Absolutely. And look, there's a huge incentive across government for us to do better when it comes to big infrastructure. But to do that, we must identify what are the problems, what are the barriers in terms of that delivery. We have the slowest planning processes anywhere on these isles. We know that. So how do we fix it? We have, in terms of the overruns and the cost per, of course, whenever those are projected, if those are projected 10 years before the final costs come in, of course, there are going to be factors that will influence the costs and the increases in relation to this. But these issues are by no means unique to us. Research carried out by the National Infrastructure Commission identified similar issues across the UK, but also found that UK costs were in many cases not dissimilar to international benchmarks. This is something that every government across the globe struggles with, but this is something that I believe, by working collectively together, not just the parties in the executive, but with the official opposition, that hopefully we will find a number of interventions in order to significantly improve how we roll out capital development and delivery here in Northern Ireland. In terms of what we are currently doing, I want to assure the House that there are a number of different initiatives and projects underway. We are hoping to bring to the Executive very shortly our investment strategy, and unlike previous iterations, the new investment strategy will take a longer view, looking out to 2050. We hope that this will mean that that longer term planning will support the delivery, and indeed we raised directly with the Chancellor the concerns about, for example, single year budgets, because we do need those multi-year budgets to enable us to plan in relation to our longer term investment strategy. It will set out a pathway for investment in infrastructure for the next 30 years to stabilise, deliver and indeed to transform. Of course, that investment strategy will also have an enabling action plan And that work will be developed and will be assessed and monitored, of course, because that is essential in terms of ensuring delivery. So we are looking at all of these structures, including the use of that internal delivery unit that we have established within the Executive Office to work with all departments to see how we can improve a number of those barriers. The assessment that had been carried out identified over 100 actions, and those have been rationalised to 12 key ones, including addressing capacity and capability barriers and infrastructure delivery, which my colleague had highlighted in terms of the skills that are required within the civil service, the skills that are required to oversee project delivery, but also those skills in terms of tackling things when they don't go right within capital projects, which often they don't, and to be able to find swift solutions to those. We're looking at the business case process. It takes a huge amount of time for business case processes to work its way through the system. I think often of the A5 project, where ministers were fully politically behind that in a 5-party executive some 17 years ago, 2007-2008, along with the Irish government. And yet, despite that political will, that road has not yet been built. So again, it is about identifying those barriers. And the question, of course, important question in this debate is, would an infrastructure commission have addressed that? Or are there indeed serious issues right throughout the entire process, including within our planning system and the appeal system within that needs to be addressed as well? Because otherwise, no matter how many independent bodies we set up, they will encounter the same challenges that departments and ministers have encountered in terms of the rollout. Procurement expertise is another key one, as it is in terms of the social licence, which I know is very important in terms of integrating those key concepts within that. I am very conscious that I am rapidly running out of time, but just to say that while we do not agree at this juncture to support just simply that one option as set out in the initial proposal, in terms of the amendment, we are content to look at that specific proposal in line with a number of other actions that would be required, and indeed to bring that back to this place and to the executive in terms of a roadmap on the way forward, because we are determined to deliver capital projects better, on time and on budget, if at all possible.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister, for that response. I now call Nicola Brogan to wind on the amendment. You have up to 3 minutes.
There is no denying that the failure to deliver a number of major capital projects across the north is alarming, and it's important that we get to the root cause of why these projects have yet to materialise. Certainly all of us here must shoulder our share of the responsibility for that. However, we must not be blind to other sources of delay. The British Government themselves have admitted that even basic infrastructure projects in the north have been chronically underfunded here for generations. So it should be no surprise that major capital projects are slow to progress when underfunding is coupled with inflation. We need only to look at the development of Casement Park and the lost €2028 for evidence of that. Another major hurdle these projects face is one directly addressed in our amendment. Legal challenges, coupled with inflation, lead to delay after delay, which in turn leads to ever-increasing costs until eventually the project is impacted by Stormont's ever-tightening budget. Of course, there must be room for people to raise their concerns and opposition to certain projects, but it cannot become an endless cycle of delays and reviews that effectively blocks much-needed projects from being developed. As you will all know, the people of West Tyrone have been waiting for the upgrade of the extremely dangerous A5 road for over 16 years now. That's over 16 years where we've missed out on major investment in the North West. Over 16 years where we've been denied the economic boom that will come with being part of an increased all-Ireland connectivity. But most importantly of all, that's over 16 years where people have been driving on such a treacherous road. Over 50 people have been killed on the A5 in that time. Families and local communities have been left devastated and torn apart in those years that we've been waiting. And there is no doubt that the ongoing legal challenges have caused lengthy delays to this project. There can be no more delays to the A5 road upgrade. The benefits of an infrastructure commission should be assessed, and the actual role it would have should be considered, but it should be done so alongside the prioritisation of important executive projects.
Thank you. I call Justin McNulty to conclude and wind up the debate on the motion. You have 5 minutes.
Casement Park will be built and will be built on my watch. Casement Park will be built and will be built on my watch. Who said that? Who said that? The First Minister said that. Casement Park is not built. Casement Park was not built in time for the Euros. Casement Park has no sign of being built. No direction on Casement Park. It stands still. A generation of Antrim footballers, hurlers and ladies footballers are missing the opportunity to play on Casement's hallowed turf through false promises by this failing executive. Sinn Féin's spokesperson for excuses on passing the buck has questioned the SDLP, the opposition's proposals and lack of proposals being brought forward. This is a proposal. Get with the programme, Sinn Féin. Get with the programme. The SDLP has produced multiple policy papers. We'll pass them on to Sinn Féin so maybe they can plagiarise more of our policy. Slow learners. Sinn Féin tried to assert the rights of opposition in Dublin, but in Stormont, no, they don't like any scrutiny at all. It's all about excuse making, passing the buck. The experts pass the buckers, that's what they are. While we hear executive parties wax lyrical about getting projects across the line for many cases to starting blocks, there's been little or no scrutiny and even less talk about the chronic overspend and colossal delays caused by inefficient government and, quite frankly, chaotic delivery structures that have been allowed to persist. Departments work in silos defending their own turf rather than delivering shared outcomes. The parties are good about blackguarding. They're experts at blackguarding about small issues that can rile the public. Meanwhile, they overspend by the billions, they overspend by the millions, failing through their lack of organisation, lack of vision, lack of joined-up thinking, lack of progress, and determination about making progress for our future, our shared future, by moving this place forward so we can unite this island. They're only interested in pointing the finger, blaming others. The executive parties are blamed, the parties are making excuses, the parties are passing the buck. I'm sick of it.
Thank you. That was a wind-up, but perhaps not the wind-up to the debate that I had indicated initially, Mr. McNulty, but thank you. Members, the question is that the amendments standing in the names of Cathal Boylan and Nicola Brogan be made. All those in favour say aye. Contrary voting no. The ayes have it. So the question is that the motion as amended be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary voting no. The ayes have it. Members, just take your ease for a moment. Okay, members, order. Order, members. The Business Committee has agreed to meet at 1 p.m. today. I propose, therefore, by leave of the Assembly, to suspend the sitting until 2 p.m. The next item of business will be, after question time. Yep. The sitting is by leave suspended.